Hello everyone and welcome once again to CST Studios, where we cover the latest tips, tricks, trends, and technology in the world of photo and video. I'm your host Craig Davis and we are glad you are with us today. Today we are going to discuss some tips and tricks for using the Insta360 Studio application to import and creatively edit your videos taken with the Insta360 X4 camera. While this information will be applicable to most of the Insta360 camera line, we are specifically addressing the latest X4 version. As you will see, not all functions in the software are applicable to all cameras and shooting modes, so it's critical that you understand these modes, file types, and their limitations before you shoot your video, as you may not be able to alter or reframe it later in post. So without any further delay, let's get going with Insta360 Studio. So let's get started by opening up Insta360 Studio. So you can see we are running the latest version, which is version 5.3.3 of Insta360 Studio software. When importing files, and again, I'm going to tell you some things that are my opinion, my ideal on how to do things, but it doesn't mean it's the only way or even the best way. It's just how I found it to be the most effective and ease. I don't like to open the files on the camera itself, on the Insta360. I will actually copy the files from here in the USB mode, copy them to a folder on my hard drive. I think it's easier, I think it's more efficient, it's faster, and I don't want to be editing files right on here. So I've already copied these files over, so I'm going to be showing you how to import them into Insta360 Studio. So I'm going to click on Open Files. I've created a folder on my hard drive on my desktop. It's called 360 Test Footage. Notice in here in this folder, you'll actually see the actual video files themselves, and we'll go over the different formats and what those mean. And you'll also see these LRV files. Do not delete these LRV files. They contain data, and I'll show you kind of what will happen if you do delete them, but they contain data that's needed by the program. You don't actually have to highlight them and import them. The system's smart enough to know that if you pick these video files, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, if you pick those and import those, it uses those LRV files to give it information. And one way you can tell if you haven't imported it or you've deleted the LRV files is, see how I can scrub through here? I can actually scrub through the video in real time. If I did not import those LRV files, I wouldn't be able to do that. So if that happens to you, if you can't scrub through this way, that's all you've done is you've not imported the LRV file. So just make sure you do that. But that's what allows that to happen. So you can see we have several different formats. What I've done for a test to kind of show you the limitations on each one of the file types is I have shot the same video outside of my home in Florida. I've shot the same video in multiple different formats, so that way I can kind of show you the differences and you can understand this before you go out and shoot, because like I mentioned earlier, you may not be able to do this later in post. So we open these files up and you can see we're in the Media tab. The Media tab is where you're going to import your footage, and you can make some changes to it, like you can add keyframes and that kind of stuff, which we'll get into. But basically you're going to maybe clip, trim, edit your video, and add some keyframes and that kind of stuff. And you can work on these files individually. But when you go up to the Project tab here, that's where you're going to put these clips together into a video project. So it'll make more sense when we get there. So this first video here, you can tell it's a 360 video. You can tell that by the wide range, and it goes all the way around. I can also look at my properties, and I can see this is a standard video. It is shot in 8K at 30 frames per second, and the bit rate is 213 megabytes per second. That'll be important later, bit rate, because you'll notice on these files they're not all the same bit rate. So it's important to note the bit rate so that you can export it properly, and I'll get into that when we talk export. You can also tell it, because I have the capability to spin around here and completely reframe it in any way I choose. That's one of the great things about doing the standard 360 video. It uses both lenses, and you can completely reframe it later. You know, you just shoot it and reframe it however you want later. The second file type we have here, this is basically the same 360 video, but shot in HDR format. So a little bit better for difficult lighting situations, say harsh sun, or it may appear to have a little bit more dynamic range, and that's the HDR. Again, still has full 360. I can still completely reframe it later in post, but it is in HDR format. And you can tell that by here. It signifies it as a HDR video. It again is 360. It is shot in 5.7K. And notice the bit rate. This time it's only 104, almost 105 megabytes per second. Definitely about half the bit rate it's the other one. So, next format. This vid3 file. It is actually not a 360 view. It's only a 180 degree view using a single lens. So if you look on here, you can see the data. It's shot in 4K. It's also 30 frames per second and a bit rate of 107.24. But you'll notice something about this file. I'm going to pull it up here. On the other 360 files, I could reframe. But because this is shot in single lens mode, if you notice, I can't reframe this file. It is what it is. Whatever direction I was holding the lens, the single lens, whether it's the front or the back, whatever direction I'm holding that lens, that is the view you're going to have. So when I play this video, there's no reframing needed or possible. It's just going to, wherever I'm aiming the lens in the front, that's what it's going to shoot. Very easy because you don't have to reframe it later, but very limited because I lose the capability to reframe it later. So hopefully I'm pointing at what I want to look at. Now you'll notice when my shadow on the ground, when I turn my arm, if I turn this sideways, horizon lock is not on. So the video, if I turn it, my hand, the video is going to turn. You need to know that when you're recording. If you think horizon lock is on, it is not. Make sure you understand that when you're using that video mode. All right, the next clip, the ProVid 4 clip. You notice that name is a little bit different. That particular clip, still a 4K clip. We'll click on our properties here. You'll see it's still shot in 30 frames per second. The bit rate is 209, almost 210 megabytes per second. This is what's called free frame video. Free frame video is also a 180, a single lens mode. I use this video mode quite often myself. It allows you to do slight reframing, as you'll see in a second. Basically keeps the camera steady, but unlike the last mode, you will see horizon lock is on. So that way you're going to get the smoothest video that you can. I'll show you slightly, see how I can move it just a little, just basically the 180 degree width. But if you go too far, you're going to introduce this, some crazy views there. So you notice when I go forward, it's still whatever is in front of me, and using the 180 degree single lens, that's what's going to be in the video. Now when I turn, you'll see the shadow. I'm going to do the same turn I did on the previous video, but if you notice, it stays perfectly straight. The horizon's perfect because horizon lock is on. So this is a very easy way to shoot a perfectly straight video, and that's why I use it a lot. So our fifth and last file we'll discuss today is also a 4K file. It's shot at 30 frames per second. Bit rate is 209.51 megabits per second. And this is in me mode. So in me mode, it uses only the bottom part of these two lenses. So that's why when you see someone shooting in me mode, they will hold the X4 this way. And basically it's going to be shooting back at me, and anything on the sides of me, it will capture. So it's great for vlogging and that kind of stuff. It keeps you straight. Make sure you do a straight video, and keeps you in frame. So that's why a lot of people use me mode for vlogging. So up until this point, we've been working in the Media tab. Let's go to the Project tab. When you click on the Project tab, it's going to say, do you want to do a new project? So I'm going to go New Project. I'm going to call it 360 File Test. And it brings those same 5 files in, because that's what I was working on in the Media tab. You can kind of see there's a little bit different. You can clearly see the 360 files. They show as 360 files. They show us a little, almost like the globe. And you can see the other files. And you see the little modes. That's telling you that it's me mode. That icon is telling you it's freeform. That's just a regular standard video file. But what the project tab does is it allows us to take all these individual video files and put them in a timeline and create a video. Basically, all you have to do is, let's say I'm going to take this HDR video. I'm going to slide it down and it'll put it on the timeline. If you notice those points, the keyframes that I put in the previous tab, they carry through to the project tab. But I can also add other keyframes. If I click here, I can move it this way. I can go further out, and let's say I wanted to change the framing here. I add another keyframe, and I turn this way. I wanted to see what an old guy looks like, and I will go forward, put another keyframe, and change it however I want. And then you will see that it goes through and it applies those keyframes to the video. So I can take the keyframes that I did in the media tab from before, and I can add more keyframes later. Okay, so in the project tab, I can mix any of these formats. It doesn't matter whether it was a single lens or 360 mode or an 8K or a 4K or an HDR. I can add all of these to the timeline into one project. So I'm going to drag these down, throw them on my timeline. I'm going to throw HDR there. I will throw all 5 formats. And I will throw the me mode right down here. If you notice on the 360 file, when I put the playhead over it, I can add keyframes. It's available to add keyframes. It's highlighted. So if I scroll over here to the next file, this is the HD file, you can see it's also highlighted. I can also add keyframes to this particular file format. I'm going to scroll over here. I'm going to go to the video. This is a single lens, no reframing video. And if you notice what happened, when I'm over here, I have no button to do keyframes because it's not allowed, but it doesn't mean I can't combine them all in one project. And if you notice, when I go over here to the me mode video, I can do keyframes, but remember we talked about it's a very limited range on how far you can move things. But I could add keyframes there if I wanted. So the purpose in showing you the functionality of these different file types is to save you from making some of the mistakes that I've made where I went out, I shot a video, I was in the wrong mode, using the wrong format. So that's the goal of this video, is helping you so you don't make the same mistakes that we made. So let's cover export. So when I go to export, after I've made all of my keyframes and all the adjustments I want to do, and if I wanted to change color and saturation, all that stuff, I'm going to go to export. It's going to give me a file name of an MP4. It's going to ask me the path, which I've set. And I created a preset, but I'm going to just walk you through the actual settings. So when you click on this, I'm always going to choose the highest resolution possible. So for this particular project, it's going to be 4K. So I will choose the 4K. The bit rate, I am going to go, since the highest file I'm using was a bit rate of 200, I'm going to choose 200 as a bit rate because I always want the highest bit rate possible. And I'm going to choose, my personal preference is H.265. If you have performance issues or maybe a not so fast computer, then you can choose the H.264 and it should work better. But if you've got a fairly decent computer, choose the H.265. I'm going to go export, and it will start exporting all of these files into one project, into one video. So after Insta360 Studio exports this file, I can then take that MP4 file into my editing program of choice. Mine is Final Cut Pro 10. I'll actually do my further edits there. I may do some color grading. I may add some graphics and that kind of stuff, and that's where I get my final project. So I do a little bit in Insta360 Studio, and I add a whole lot more and try to get a little bit better production value out of Final Cut Pro X. So that's pretty much it for my process and understanding the different file formats. I hope this saved you some time and trouble down the road. And if you've got any questions, please leave some comments in there. And I will also leave some links to the X4 themselves, the actual X4 camera, and all the attachments I use, like the selfie sticks, I also use this amazing clamp that is awesome. It holds on to anything, very strong, so I'm really happy with it. And I also use the GPS watch. We're going to talk about how amazing this GPS watch is and all the cool things you can do in a later video. But that's it. Thanks again for watching our video today, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We look forward to seeing you soon, and don't forget to create something amazing today.